Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, November 30th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, look for a high of 69.2 degrees today, with a low of 44.6 overnight, so layer up for that evening chill. Coming up, we'll break down the reasons behind President Trump's decision to pause all U.S. asylum rulings nationwide and unpack how brutal winter storms wrecked travel plans right after Thanksgiving. We'll also cover other key stories from around the world. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. We're following a major development out of Washington. The Trump administration has put all asylum decisions on hold after a deadly shooting near the White House. Reporter Ethan is with us. Ethan, what happened?
The shooting happened Wednesday, November 26th, just outside the White House perimeter. According to PBS NewsHour and NBC4 Washington, specialist Sarah Beckstrom, a 20-year-old military police officer from the West Virginia National Guard, was killed in what officials called an ambush-style attack. Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, 24, was also shot and underwent surgery. As of today, November 30th, he's still in very critical condition, per updates carried by WUSA 9 and CBS News.
Who were they, and why were they in D.C.?
They were part of a federalized joint task force, nearly 200 Guard members at the time, with another 500 ordered in by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Washington Post and PBS note this is tied to President Trump's crime-fighting mission in the Capitol, where Guard patrols have been visible on the National Mall. West Virginia's Governor Patrick Morrisey ordered flags at half-staff for Beckstrom, and there was a moment of silence at West Virginia University's game this weekend. Friends and commanders say Beckstrom enlisted in 2023 and volunteered for the D.C. deployment.
Do investigators have a suspect?
Yes. U.S. Attorney for D.C. Jeanine Pirro charged 29-year-old Rahmanullah Lakanwal on Friday, November 28th, with first-degree murder in Beckstrom's death and 2 counts of assault with intent to kill while armed. The Guardian and PBS report he's an Afghan national originally from Kandahar. He came to the U.S. in September 2021 through the Biden administration's Operation Allies Welcome, which resettled tens of thousands of Afghans who'd worked alongside U.S. forces. Prosecutors say more charges are possible. Pirro told Fox News there are, quote, many charges to come, end quote.
What do we know about his background?
Quite a bit. Multiple outlets, including PBS NewsHour and NBC4 Washington, report Lakanwal worked with CIA-backed Afghan Zero units, starting in 2012, later becoming a team leader and GPS specialist. Government files, cited by Reuters and Military.com, indicate U.S. agencies confirmed parts of his service during vetting. He was living in Bellingham, Washington with his wife and 5 children, doing gig work like Amazon Flex over the summer, and neighbors described him as polite and struggling with English.
Did he have asylum?
He did. #Afghanivac advocates told The Guardian he applied for asylum under Biden, but wasn't granted until April 2025, under the current administration, after multiple rounds of vetting. That's an important timeline because the White House has blamed Biden-era screening, but this particular approval happened months into President Trump's term. The Washington Post notes that's part of what's fueling questions about what changed in the vetting process, if anything.
Any word on motive?
Not yet. As of today, no official motive has been established, and federal authorities are still executing search warrants, including in Washington state, according to CBS News and The Guardian. President Trump has called it a terrorist attack and labeled Lakanwal, quote, cuckoo, end quote, in a holiday message. But the U.S. Attorney's Office says the classification isn't official at this point, and the motive remains under investigation.
Let's talk about the policy move. What exactly did the administration do?
On Saturday, November 29th, USCIS Director Joseph Edlow announced an indefinite nationwide halt to all asylum decisions. PBS NewsHour and CBS report it covers so-called affirmative cases handled by USCIS and could reach defensive cases in immigration court, though details are still being clarified. Edlow posted on X, the decisions are paused until, quote, every alien is vetted and screened to the maximum degree possible, end quote. He added, quote, the safety of the American people always comes first, end quote.
Is that the only pause?
No, Secretary of State Marco Rubio also ordered an immediate pause on issuing visas for travelers holding Afghan passports. NBC4 Washington and LAist report he framed it as a national security step while systems are reviewed. It dovetails with broader Trump promises to slow or halt immigration from what he's called third world countries, to let the system, in his words, recover.
How is this different from prior restrictions?
The Department of Homeland Security had already imposed travel restrictions on 19 countries since June, including Afghanistan, Cuba, Haiti, Iran, and Myanmar, as Channel News Asia reported. But an across-the-board pause on asylum decisions is far more sweeping, because it affects people already in the pipeline inside the United States. And the Afghan visa pause is narrower by nationality, but potentially collides with court rulings that have limited blanket nationality-based exclusions in the past. Legal scholars told the Washington Post they expect immediate challenges.
What laws are they citing?
Publicly, officials haven't laid out a detailed legal memo. Edlow referenced the Asylum Statute 8 U.S.C. 1158, which sets procedures but also gives the executive some discretion. For visa and entry suspensions, administrations often invoke 8 U.S.C. 1182, F, a broad presidential authority, though advocates argue it can conflict with 8 U.S.C. 1152's ban on nationality discrimination in issuing immigrant visas. Cato Institute analyses and federal court records suggest those tensions will be a flashpoint again.
Have any lawsuits been filed yet?
Not as of this morning. According to LAist and Westlaw case dockets reviewed by reporters, no temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions have been granted yet. But refugee groups and attorneys are preparing filings, and #Afghanivac President Sean Van Diver called the Afghan visa pause a likely violation of federal law and existing court orders. He accused the administration of using, quote, a single violent individual, end quote, to justify pre-planned crackdowns.
How many people could this affect?
Potentially hundreds of thousands. The asylum backlog already tops 1 million cases nationally, and putting decisions on ice will deepen that queue, NPR has reported previously. For Afghans, the visa pause affects family reunification and special immigrant visa applicants who aided U.S. forces. And for those inside the U.S., many rely on timely asylum decisions for work authorization and stability, which now becomes uncertain.
What's the administration's argument for pausing now?
Officials say they need to recheck screening protocols and review approvals granted since 2021. The White House has pointed to what it calls Biden-era vetting failures, even though, as Reuters and the Washington Post note, Lakanwal cleared multiple checks and received asylum this April under Trump. USCIS is emphasizing a maximum screening approach, arguing that a temporary halt is necessary to prevent further risk. They haven't explained why existing Trump-era vetting in April didn't catch new concerns.
How are allies and local communities reacting?
There's grief and anxiety. In West Virginia, the governor's orders and tributes at WVU reflect the pain of losing a young soldier. NBC4 and CBS have shared remembrances that she was dedicated and eager to serve. In Afghan-American communities, there's fear of backlash and collective punishment, The Guardian and NPR report. Advocates say most evacuees underwent extensive biometrics, fingerprinting, and counterterrorism checks before ever boarding flights in 2021.
What else do we know about the suspect's recent behavior?
Neighbors told The Guardian he'd been quiet, polite, and seemed to be struggling to find steady work. A former landlord told reporters he had limited English and kept to himself. Some acquaintances say he disappeared roughly 2 weeks before the shooting, prompting questions about where he traveled and whom he contacted. Federal agents have been executing warrants in Washington state and elsewhere to reconstruct his movements.
Walk us through the security posture in D.C. right now.
The guard presence has been unmistakable. Reuters photographs, published by PBS NewsHour, showed uniformed troops patrolling near the National Mall as part of the administration's crime-fighting push. The Joint Task Force is now larger, with an additional 500 troops ordered in after the shooting. City leaders have been careful in their language, but the Guard remains a visible part of the response.
If this is eventually labeled terrorism, what changes?
Legally, a terrorism classification could expand the investigative toolkit, and it would shape charging decisions. But prosecutors are often cautious, and right now they're focusing on the homicide and assault counts they can prove, according to CBS News. Politically, though, the president's language is already driving policy moves, even without an official terrorism label. That's why legal analysts told the Washington Post they expect courts to scrutinize the connection between the shooting and nationwide policy shifts.
How are mainstream Republicans framing this?
They're largely backing the pauses as prudent. Fox News interviews with senior officials, including U.S. Attorney Pirro, emphasize what they call systemic vetting gaps. But there's also an undercurrent of trust but verify toward past admissions, including Operation Allies Welcome, which resettled about 76,000 Afghans after the U.S. withdrawal. Some national security veterans caution against tarring wartime allies broadly, noting many risked their lives to help U.S. troops.
And Democrats?
Democrats and a number of refugee advocates are pushing back, saying the response is overbroad and punitive. They argue the asylum system already has rigorous checks, and that blanket pauses punish people who followed the rules. NPR's reporting highlights the human stakes delays in work permits, separation from family, and the chilling effect on people fleeing persecution. Expect them to lean on past court rulings that limited nationality-based bans.
Any precedent for halting asylum decisions like this?
Not at this scale. Past administrations have tweaked processing or narrowed eligibility, and the courts have batted those changes around, but an indefinite nationwide stop on decisions sweeps up every case, no matter the facts. Legal experts told the Washington Post that judges will likely ask whether the government can show a specific, evidence-based need.
What do we know about the charging timeline?
Charges came down Friday, 2 days after the attack, which is very fast in a homicide probe. That suggests investigators moved quickly on forensics and probable cause, as NBC4 reported. Prosecutors can add counts as evidence develops, especially if new facts support terrorism-related charges. For now, they've anchored the case with murder and assault while they build the rest.
How's Staff Sergeant Wolf doing today?
Still in very critical condition, according to WUSA 9 and CBS News as of this morning. His family and the Guard community have asked for privacy and prayers, and the governor's office has been providing updates when they can. It underscores the severity of what happened, not just a fatal ambush, but a second life still in the balance. Hospitals and law enforcement are coordinating closely given the high-profile nature of the case.
Could this affect people already approved for asylum?
That's a key unknown. EDLO's order freezes decisions, but it doesn't automatically revoke approvals that are final. However, the administration has signaled it wants to re-examine green cards and asylum grants from the last few years, particularly those tied to Operation Allies Welcome, according to Forbes and the Washington Post. If they do that, you can expect legal challenges arguing that retroactive reversals are unlawful.
What are advocates advising Afghan families to do?
Stay in close touch with attorneys and keep documentation current. Vandiver and other #Afghanovac leaders told LAist that families should prepare for delays and save proof of service, employment, and vetting they've already completed. They're also urging congressional offices to intervene in urgent cases, like separated families or medical emergencies. And they warn against misinformation. The core programs still exist even if decisions are paused.
Is Congress getting involved?
Not formally yet, but staff on both sides are asking for briefings. Republicans want details on vetting gaps and any intelligence leads. Democrats are pressing for clarity on the legal basis and timelines to restart decisions. The Washington Post reports that committee letters could go out as early as this week if courts don't step in first.
Could the administration carve out exceptions?
It could, and that might be what we see next. For example, humanitarian emergencies or people with U.S. citizen spouses could get prioritized once DHS finalizes its review. PBS NewsHour notes that even under prior bans, exceptions and waivers existed on paper, though in practice, they were hard to secure. The test will be whether the government defines clear criteria and actually applies them.
What should people watch for in the coming days?
3 things. First, any court filings seeking to block the asylum freeze or the Afghan visa pause, those could come as early as this week. Second, a clearer legal rationale from USCIS and state on how they're grounding these moves, especially if they cite 1182F. And third, updates from prosecutors on motive, which will heavily influence the politics.
Bottom line, Ethan, how does this moment fit into the bigger immigration picture?
It's a dramatic escalation in an already strained system. As NPR has detailed, backlogs are enormous, and broad freezes can ripple into work permits, court calendars, and family reunifications. The administration is betting that security concerns will outweigh those costs in the public's mind. Critics say the policy punishes many for the alleged act of one, and courts will likely get the final word.
Ethan, thanks for breaking this down. We'll keep following Staff Sergeant Wolf's recovery and any legal moves on the asylum freeze. Thank you. Good morning. Millions are still trying to get home after Thanksgiving, and winter weather isn't helping. Chloe, bring us up to speed.
It's been a rough 24 hours across the Midwest and Great Lakes. A powerful early-season storm dumped heavy snow, sleet, and freezing rain right into the peak return window yesterday, Saturday, November 29th. CBS News and The Washington Post both noted that more than 81 million Americans were traveling between November 25th and December 1st, making this one of the busiest post-holiday stretches on record.
Where did the worst of it hit yesterday?
Northern Iowa was a standout early, with official National Weather Service reports confirming more than 8 inches by Saturday morning. Waterloo reported 14 inches and Fort Dodge 13.5, while Mason City picked up about 12.6 inches over 24 hours ending 9 p.m. Saturday. AP coverage carried by NY1 and Tampa Bay 28 detailed warnings from Montana all the way to Ohio.
What about Chicago and the surrounding states?
Forecasts from the National Weather Service called for at least 8 inches in and around Chicago, with widespread 6 to 10 across parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. That snow combined with gusty winds to snarl highways and airport operations. The AP dispatches, again via NY1 and Tampa Bay 28, made clear that winter storm warnings were expansive.
Did this ever reach blizzard levels?
It didn't meet the technical bar. The AP reports, as relayed by NY1 and Tampa Bay 28, say sustained or frequent gusts of 35 miles per hour with quarter-mile visibility for 3 hours weren't widespread. Winds hit 40 miles per hour in spots, so blowing and drifting did make interstates like I-29, I-90, and I-94 tricky.
How did air travel hold up yesterday?
Not well. FlightAware showed average delays around an hour at Chicago O'Hare and St. Louis early, then things deteriorated fast. By Saturday afternoon, O'Hare had more than 1,000 cancellations, ending the evening at 251, with Midway at 190 cancellations and more than 80 delays, according to updates cited by the Points Guy, Travel and Leisure, and CBS News.
Was there a ground stop in Chicago?
Yes. O'Hare was on a ground delay program averaging 451 minutes, and ground stops hit both Chicago airports Saturday afternoon. Nationwide, nearly 5,000 flights were delayed and 1,500 canceled on November 29th, growing to about 200 cancellations across Saturday and Sunday, per those same travel trackers.
Any other airport hotspots we should note?
Dallas-Fort Worth struggled Friday night ahead of the Maine snow, as storms and wind pushed it to the top of FlightAware's misery map. Houston and Austin saw weather-related slowdowns too when the cold front kicked off thunderstorms, as reported by Local 10 and My San Antonio. That southern line of storms was the warm side signature of this same system.
Let's talk roads. How dangerous did it get?
Very slick across Iowa, northern Illinois, and Indiana, with snow-covered and slushy stretches reducing visibility. A 45-vehicle pileup on westbound I-70 near Terre Haute just before 10 a.m. Saturday closed lanes around midday. Indiana State Police said there were no serious injuries, and Times Now News and We Are Iowa noted the scene cleared mid to late afternoon, with a full reopening by evening.
Did officials ask people to stay off the roads?
They did. In Grant County, Indiana, Sheriff Del Garcia urged folks to stay home for, quote, hot chocolate, TV, or games, end quote, stressing safety over speed, as AP coverage on NY1 and Tampa Bay 28 relayed. That message echoed across multiple county advisories as conditions deteriorated.
Paint the picture for us. What did people see out there?
Chicago had wind-slanted icicles on the Loyola Beach Pier and white-capped waves pounding Lake Michigan, captured by an AP photographer and shared by NY1 and Tampa Bay 28. Snow blanketed parts of Michigan, including Ann Arbor, where flurries fell during the Ohio State-Michigan game. It was cold, raw, and blustery, with the Washington Post noting wind chills dipping below zero in places.
You mentioned the game. Did weather change the matchup?
Only at the margins. Essentially sports, Athlon Sports, and WHIO reported a winter storm warning from 3 p.m. Saturday to 10 a.m. Sunday around Ann Arbor, with snow showers near kickoff, temperatures hovering in the upper 20s to low 30s, and gusts to 17 miles per hour. The dusting made footing slick and nudged teams toward the run, but coverage called the overall impact negligible, and Ohio State won 27-9.
How far north did the heavy totals go?
Near the Canadian border, reports cited by We Are Iowa and AccuWeather showed totals climbing into the 20 to 30-inch range, especially where lake effect bands locked in. Downwind of Lakes Erie and Ontario in New York, lake effect snow machine cranked hard. That's classic for early season cold shots when the lakes are still relatively warm.
Was this just a one-day event?
The peak disruption came yesterday, but it's been a week-long conveyor belt. Storms rolled through the southern plains and northwest on Monday, November 24th, then slid into the Mississippi Valley Tuesday, slicking roads from eastern Texas to Indiana and Kentucky, as Travel and Tour World and the Las Vegas Sun noted. By Tuesday into Wednesday, snow spread across the northeastern Rockies and High Plains from Montana to Colorado, and by Wednesday, rain was griping the East Coast, with thunderstorms delaying flights in Atlanta.
And temperatures?
A true Arctic shot. The Washington Post reports teens and 20s across the central U.S. and wind chills below zero in pockets. Those readings are well below seasonal averages for late November into the final days before December.
Any silver lining on injuries or damage?
Thankfully, no major injuries were tied to the big I-70 crash, or most slide-offs reported yesterday. Still, the hazards were undeniable, and outlets from iHeart to The Guardian and Milwaukee Independent leaned into preparedness messaging. The idea is to plan ahead, pack winter kits, and give yourself time.
Are forecasters worried about another storm this week?
Yes, right away. The National Weather Service's Weather Prediction Center and NOAA are flagging a Monday to Tuesday storm, December 1st to 3, that could bring freezing rain, significant ice, and new snow to parts of the Appalachians and interior Northeast. AP outlooks carried by NY1, Tampa Bay 28, and Loud 102.3 emphasized that risk.
Where's the highest ice threat with that next system?
Probabilistic guidance highlights the spine of the Appalachians, from western North Carolina's Blue Ridge through the West Virginia and Virginia Highlands into the Shenandoah Valley. The WPC maps show freezing rain, likely over 1/10 of an inch, with 10 to 30% odds of a 1/4 inch or more in those corridors. That's the kind of accretion that snaps branches and downs lines.
What about snow potential for the Northeast?
Moderate to heavy snow is on the table for the interior Northeast and parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Midwest. with a wintry mixed zone complicating commutes. Some outlooks, including Hindustan Times and the Epoch Times, suggest the system could consolidate into a nor'easter as it lifts from Canada and redevelops along the coast. The Farmer's Almanac and Old Farmer's Almanac have both been telegraphing an active start to winter, and this fits that pattern.
How should travelers approach the next 48 to 72 hours?
Keep plans flexible and check conditions twice, once when you book and again before you leave. Airlines are posting waivers, and FlightAware's misery map can show at-a-glance trouble spots. On the roads, the advice is simple. Slow down, increase following distance, and carry blankets, chargers, and a shovel.
For folks in Chicago and the upper Midwest, is the worst behind them today?
The bulk of the snow fell yesterday, but cleanup lingers and lake effect bursts can still surprise. Municipal crews are catching up, yet refreeze is a real risk tonight with those sub-freezing temperatures. Even a dusting on top of packed snow can hide ice, so today isn't a green light to speed.
Any standout stories from Iowa beyond the totals?
Spencer and other northwest Iowa towns saw roughly 7 to 13 inches, and that gradient matters for drifting. Mason City's 12.6 inches over a 24-hour window illustrates how fast it stacked up when rates exceeded an inch per hour, as NWS spotter logs show. Those rates overwhelmed plows during the Saturday morning surge when many travelers hit the road.
And why didn't this get a blizzard label, given the chaos?
The blizzard designation is strict by design. You need sustained or frequent 35-mile-per-hour gusts and quarter-mile visibility or less for 3 hours. And AP reports via NY1 and Tampa Bay 28 say that threshold wasn't consistently met yesterday. The winds were fierce, but not persistently enough across the corridor to flip the switch.
Did the South see significant severe weather with the front?
It was more a noisy line than a classic severe outbreak. Local 10 and My San Antonio described heavy rain and some thunderstorms from southern Missouri through Louisiana and into Texas, with marginal severe risk. That was still enough to slow Friday evening flights and soak roads ahead of the holiday return push.
What should sports fans expect at outdoor venues today and tomorrow?
Today, November 30th, you'll still feel the bite. Gusts, wind chills, and occasional snow showers in the Great Lakes. Fields may be slick early before crews scrape and salt, much like Ann Arbor yesterday. By Monday, attention shifts east, where any freezing rain could push postponements or force earlier start time decisions.
Any last word on preparedness before we let you go?
Think layers, traction, and information. The Guardian and Milwaukee Independent both stress building a trunk kit, water, snacks, warm gear, so you're never caught short. And keep an eye on NWS updates and airline apps. The next storm window opens as soon as tomorrow.
Chloe, thanks for helping us navigate a very messy weekend.
Always here to help, Grace. Stay safe out there and give yourself extra time.
Here are some other headlines. In Jerusalem, a plea from the premier turns the legal page into a political cliffhanger. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has formally asked President Isaac Herzog for a pardon, a pre-verdict pitch wrapped in a 111-page brief that argues his corruption trial is kneecapping governance during a complex security crisis. Herzog's office calls it an extraordinary request, while Netanyahu says the case is a distraction from duty and national unity. Opposition figures, including Yair Lapid, blast the bid as a confession in all but name, warning it would bend the rule of law out of shape. Why it matters. The move could spark a constitutional crunch, with the Justice Ministry and potentially the Supreme Court caught between the gavel and the government, even as Washington pressure adds heat from across the street. In Florida, diplomacy goes from palm to pressure. Top Trump administration officials are meeting Ukrainian negotiators in West Palm Beach to fine-tune a U.S.-backed peace framework. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and advisor Jared Kushner are hosting Club's team led by National Security and Defense Council Secretary Rustam Umarov, who stepped in after Andriy Yermak resigned amid a sudden corruption probe. On the table, a fine-tuned 28-point plan that freezes front lines and defers NATO membership concessions Kyiv has resisted, but is now weighing under intense U.S. urging. Next stop, Moscow. Witkoff is slated to pitch the plan directly to Vladimir Putin next week. The pace is blistering, the protocol is unconventional, and the clock is conspicuously ticking toward year's end. China's factory pulse still feels faint, despite a tariff détente. The official manufacturing PMI nudged up to 49.2 in November from 49.0, staying below the 50 mark for an eighth straight month, more contraction than construction. A recent trade truce between Presidents Xi and Trump, with Washington having certain tariffs and Beijing pausing rare earth export restraints, offered a handshake but not a hand-up for output. Analysts say property pains and weak consumer demand continue to weigh, making Beijing's roughly 5% growth target a high-wire act. Without heavier stimulus to kindle consumption, this recovery could be more slow burn than quick turn, with industrial stabilization possibly out of reach before 2026. In short, optimism is on order, but the factory floor is still checking the inventory of confidence. A city in mourning counts the cost of combustible corners. Hong Kong authorities say the death toll from the Wong Fuk Court inferno in Tai Po has climbed to 146, with about 100 residents still unaccounted for. The blaze engulfed 7 of 8 towers, reportedly accelerated by flammable renovation materials, bamboo scaffolding and styrofoam panels, turning a high-rise into a high-risk lattice of flames. 11 people tied to the project have been arrested on charges including manslaughter and corruption. 79 were injured, and crowds continue to lay flowers as migrant workers from Indonesia and the Philippines remain among the missing. It's Hong Kong's deadliest disaster since 1948. Beijing has ordered nationwide building inspections and warned against those seeking to fan political flames under the national security law. And in Switzerland, a vote that kept its powder dry and its policy unchanged. Voters rejected a referendum to extend mandatory national service to women, shelving the citizen service idea that aimed to swap the male-only draft for universal civic duty. Supporters touted equality and help for environmental and social sectors. Opponents warned of multi-billion franc costs and delayed workforce entry, noting women already shouldered disproportionate unpaid care. The result reaffirms the status quo in one of Europe's last conscription holdouts and puts a constitutional rewrite back in the drawer. Equality, for now, remains more slogan than soldier. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with GPT-5, Gemini Pro 3, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.